bright future. Every student matters.
Hi students, welcome to this session. In this session, we are going to start with the chapter Nutrition in Animals. In the previous chapter, we talked about how do plants obtain their nutrition, and we saw that the green plants specifically are autotrophic in nature. That means that they can prepare their own food. But the animals, they are dependent on the plants either directly or indirectly to obtain their food. Right? So nutrition, again, like we have already discussed in class 6, we know that nutrition is a very important process, and with the help of this process, we are able to maintain a healthy life. Right? So when we are talking about the animal nutrition, the important thing to remember is that animals are directly or indirectly dependent on the plants. Some of the animals eat the plants directly. Some of the animals eat the plant-eating animals, whereas few animals are such, including human beings, that feed on both plant and animals, right? So we see that all the organisms, be it human beings, be it animals, be it any kind of, say the aquatic animal, they all need nutrition for their growth, for getting energy, right, and for various life processes that occur in the body of an organism. So when we talk about animal nutrition, it includes the nutrient requirements, mode of intake of food, and its utilization in the body, right? So what are the things that are included in the animal nutrition? First of all, nutrient requirements, mode of intake of food, that means in what way the food is taken in the body by the organisms, and the utilization in the body. When we are talking about the nutrients requirement, we have already talked about in the class 6, we saw that there are few nutrients that are present in the food that our body required in a balanced way. What are these nutrients? These are carbohydrates, protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals. All of these nutrients play different roles in the body of the organism. Apart from these, we also have the nutrient that is fiber or roughage, which is important for the digestion purpose, right? So these are the nutrients which are required by the body for various purposes, to obtain energy, so that the various life processes can take place, to preserve us from your any kind of disease, right? So it builds immunity. Apart from that, it also helps in growth and bodybuilding. The another nutrient, that is the roughage, it is used for a good digestion, so that your body digests your food properly. What exactly is digestion? Let's understand that. Now, what we are eating, whatever food that we are eating, that food is in complex forms. For example, let's say we are eating rice. We know that rice contains a carbohydrate called as starch. So this starch is a complex substance, right? It is a complex substance which the body cannot utilize as is, right? So this is the complex substance, right? So starch cannot be utilized as is. That means it has to be broken down into simpler forms, right? So it is broken down into the simpler forms, which is utilized by the body, right? Now, these simpler forms are the parts which are absorbed. So we see that these are the nutrient requirements, and the utilization of the body occurs after the digestion. So this process where the complex component of the food is broken down into simpler substances is called as the digestion, right? So the complex substances, everything that we eat, that is your carbohydrate, protein, fat, vitamins and minerals, all of these are the complex substances. Let's say if you are eating any oily food, right? So the fat that is going in your body with that oil is actually a complex substance, and it is broken down into simpler substance, and only then will the body utilize it. And this whole process is called as the digestion. And in this chapter, we are going to discuss that how the digestion takes place in human beings as well as in the grass-eating animals and also in some other unicellular organisms. So in this way, we see how the nutrition in animals takes place and what does this include. When we are talking about the mode of intake of food, that is the first step of the beginning. That means it is the beginning of the nutrition. That means first thing is to obtain the food. How do we take the food and eat it? Let's say in human beings, when we talk about if there is an apple, what you do is you take the apple and you bite it with your mouth. So your mode is biting and chewing, right? So this is how you're taking the food into your body, right? So in this way, we are going to talk about the different ways of taking food by the organisms. When we talk about human beings, how we are eating the food is by picking up the food with the help of our hand, biting it and then chewing it. We are going to discuss this process also in detail when we talk about digestion in human beings. For now, we just need to understand that this process that we are taking the food and we are eating it, this is the intake of the food in the body, right? So different organisms have different ways in which they eat or obtain their food. For example, if we talk about bees and hummingbirds, right? Bees and hummingbirds, what they do is they, first of all, what do they feed on? They feed on the nectar of the flower, right? They feed on the nectar of the flowers. And how do they do that? They suck this nectar, right? Then if you talk about infants of human beings or any other small baby organism, for example, if we talk about pups, if we talk about kittens, all of these are dependent on the babies, or rather let's say infants of human race and other animals. They depend on mother's milk, right? So these organisms are feeding on the mother's milk. Another type of organism like the pythons and snakes, what do they do? Pythons are a type of snakes, right? Pythons and other snakes, what they do is they swallow their prey. As you can see over here, pythons are they do not have poison, so what do they do is they hold their prey and they wrap themselves around the prey until they stop breathing and then they swallow it as a whole, right? Other snakes also perform the same, or they intake the food in the same way, that is the prey in the same way. The only thing is they use their poison to kill them first, right? So in this way we see that how different organisms are feeding different things and in different ways, right? When we talk about, these are the land animals. When we talk about the aquatic animals, few of the aquatic animals, what do? They filter the food, right? They filter the small microscopic food particles and they eat them, right? So some of the aquatic animals, they filter tiny food particles that are floating near them, right? So in this way we see how there are different ways in which the food is taken by these organisms, right? Now let's perform an activity wherein you have to fill this particular table. In this table, what you are going to do is that you are going to write down that these are the names of the animals, right? So these are the names of the animals. You are going to write down what kind of food they eat and what is the mode of the feeding. You can discuss this with your friends. You can also observe these animals around you, and you can discuss it with your teachers as well. So let's perform this activity. First of all, let's talk about snails. So you must have seen the snails these snails are usually visible during this monsoon seasons, right? So snails, what they do is they usually feed on plants, right? They feed on plants and algae and fungi. What is the mode of feeding? They eat by scraping, right? They eat by scraping. Then if we talk about ant, so ant usually feeds on the food particle. This is something which you can observe, especially during the summers. Suppose if you're eating something and you have, let's say, dropped a few crumbs of, say, a cookie that you are eating, you will find after some times the ants will come and they will pick up the food and they will take it. So they feed by chewing, right? We know eagle eats other animals. It's a predator, so it eats other animals, right? Smaller animals. And what it does, it captures and swallows, right? So in this way you will be able to fill up all of these, like we have already talked how hummingbird, lice and mosquito, they all feed by sucking bud, right? Hummingbird feeds on the nectar, whereas lice and mosquito, they feed on your blood, right? Butterfly and housefly, they eat by siphoning, right? Siphoning is basically a method where they have a tube which sucks up the food material, right? And this again, butterfly feeds on the nectar, whereas housefly eats everything, right? Almost everything. So in this way you will discuss again, like I have helped you. You can name more animals and you can discuss it with your teacher and your friends and fill this table so that you have an understanding that what kind of food different organisms eat and what is the mode of feeding in them, right? Now let's talk about a special kind of animal, that is the starfish. If you have gone to the beaches, you will find that there are small starfish which are present on the surface of the beach sometimes, and what happens is that when you look at it, you will find that you will not be able to understand that how this animal actually eats. So there is a very special way in which the starfish eats. Let's understand that. Usually the starfish feeds on animals that are covered by hard shells, right? So these hard shells, what are these? These hard shells are made up of calcium carbonate, right? What do they do is they open the hard shell of these animals, and then next step is the stomach pops open, right? Then the stomach of this animal pops out, and the space that the animal has created in the hard shell, from there the stomach pops out through its mouth, right? Then what happens is that the hard shell contains a soft animal inside, right? If we talk about snail has a hard shell on it, but the animal inside it is quite soft. So once it has broken the hard shell and once it has opened up the hard shell, now it has accessibility, or it has access to the soft animal. So what it does, it feeds on the soft animal that is present inside the hard shell, right? Once it has eaten the soft animal, the stomach goes back. Into the body and the process of digestion starts, right? So in this way we see how there are different organisms and what kind of food do they eat and how different is the mode of obtaining the food. Many a times we observe that the mode of obtaining food largely depends on the kind of food they eat. And so, like you saw that in mosquitoes and in your lice, usually how do they eat the food or how do they feed is by sucking, because they are feeding on blood, right? So it is basically depending on the kind of food the animal is eating. The mode is determined with that.